When you talk about heating or cooling, you talk about energy. An efficient system, it doesn't mean a system that it's turned off. An efficient system, it is a system that doesn't consume a lot of energy but provide a lot of capacity. So design, it is extremely important. After more than 30 years experience on heating, ventilation, air conditioning and refrigeration, I just realized that yes, we can recover the energy, but some people try to recover the energy in a way that makes things almost impossible. First, if you want to recover a heat in a store, you have to have first a source of heat, because heat recovery, it is not a heating system. Today, I will show you how we can redirect the heating, which normally it is eliminated by a condenser when refrigeration equipment remove the energy from a product. So instead to dump that energy outside into the atmosphere, we can use a plate heat exchanger to redirect that energy into the heat exchangers of the air handling unit to heat the store. Unlike in the old time, the technology advances. Today we're using building management controls, refrigeration equipment controls, programmable logic controls, and these controls have the capability to send data to HMI, to a human machine interface. You can call it front end panel. And on that panel, if the design is well done, you can see the entire installation, just like you see in this picture. So you can see the entire heat recovery system. When we talk about heat recovery system, actually, we talk about the energy which is eliminated via the condenser, which is mounted outside a store. And some good people thought that rather than dumping this heat outside in the atmosphere, we should recirculate the refrigerant through a plate heat exchanger, and that plate heat exchanger will heat like a heating agent, which is the water that circulates through a down flow heater, which uses a water heat exchanger, and it will heat the store, which actually not heat the store, will bring back the energy which is taken out by the refrigeration equipment. And in this picture you will see also a boiler. That boiler, it is only to control the temperature that go into this plate heat exchangers, but also you will be able to see he's got a three-way valve which can divert the heating agent, I mean the water, in case that we require a higher temperature, because we don't want to disturb the refrigerant pressure into the system. I will explain to you more in detail how this thing work. So what you have to understand now from this picture is that the refrigerant it is diverted, so it's not going 100% through the condenser. Part of it goes through the plate heat exchanger, and it is heating the water which is circulated into this through the downflow heaters, and then the downflow heaters have fans, and it transfers that heat back into the store. But to have this possibility, we need to have another source of heat. We have to heat the store. There won't be nothing to recover if you do not have a heat source, and that's why I put a boiler. And please just don't leave, because I'm going to explain to you more in detail how this system works. Before I will go further, I have to let you know that there are many type of methods to keep the product cool into a store, and you have to be very careful with this heat recovering system sometime, because if the software is not correctly written, or if the valves are bypassed, you might lower the refrigerant pressure and you might not have a refrigeration process. Especially in this case, you have to pay attention. This type of refrigeration equipment, it's using the carbon dioxide to transport the energy and to remove the heat from the product into the store. So this carbon dioxide circulates through a heat exchanger. It is under a lot of pressure, about 33 bars. It's subcritical system. And when you will use heat recovery system, you have to make sure that you're not dropping the pressure of the primary refrigerant too much. Otherwise, you might ruin the refrigeration process, and the pressure will grow up on the carbon dioxide area, and the carbon dioxide will be released into the atmosphere. Now let's see how this particular system it is designed. You will have the primary refrigeration system section, the carbon dioxide section, and the water section. What you'll see here, you'll see the refrigeration section. You have a compressor, you have the condenser, you have the TX valve, and also you will have this plate heat exchanger, which acts like a condenser. So that's the heat recovery module. Now this is the carbon dioxide section. So a very cold carbon dioxide on a liquid form, it is moved through that system, so it's losing the energy on that plate heat exchanger, and it will gain energy onto this heat exchanger inside the store. And finally you'll have the water circuit, and also you can see you have a boiler. It is very easy. The water will be heated by that plate heat exchanger. You will exchange heat with the refrigerant, but also the boiler will help when the temperature outside will be very low. So this is the system. It's obvious that there are many systems on the market, and this one has got a boiler because it helps the heating process. But you can use this system without a boiler. However, if you will decide to use this system without a boiler to control the heating agent temperature, you must have in the store another source of heat, because this is a heat recovering system. This is not a heater. This will not generate heat. This system will only recover heat. I came across Marks and Spencer stores which have only a heat recovery system fitted, and they would expect in the middle of the winter to have a warm store, and that concept ended up in a disaster. Like I said, if you choose not to have a boiler in line with a plate heat exchanger that recovers the energy from refrigerant, you have to have a separate source of heat, either from the boilers or a heat pump, whatever, but you have to have a source of heat, because the refrigeration equipment will absorb a lot of energy, leaving a very cold shop. And honestly, if your shop gets very cold, about 5 degrees, let's put it this way, then you will not have any duty on to your refrigeration equipment, because there's nothing to warm up the product. So the refrigeration equipment will work very relaxed, and there will not be energy to be recovered, and then you will freeze into your store. So it is a very absurd and weird idea of believing that heat recovery system will heat up your store. I work for Marks and Spencer in Yorkshire, Sheffield, and I found only a heat recovery system fitted there, and the store would expect a wonderful, miraculous temperature, and that was not possible. That was a very bad mistake. Anyway, if you look into the system, you can see you have the heat recovery system, you have the refrigeration heat exchanger to the bottom, and then on the top in the left hand side you have the heat recovery heat exchanger, and then you have the separate heat exchangers that it's got is heating agent temperature controlled by a boiler. So that boiler create the heat, the refrigeration equipment try to take the heat out, and the heat is recovered through this heat exchanger plate, which heats the water to bring the energy back into this shop. So guys, it is very important to remember this. Heat recovery system, it is not something that creates heat. It will only recover the heat. I personally experienced problems with people which don't understand what heat recovery it is for, and if you'll imagine that if you do not have a source of heat into the store, then there will be nothing to recover when you talk about the heat, and your store will become extremely cold, and of course the refrigeration equipment will not have to work hard at all because the product will be cold all the time. Then you will complain because your store is very cold. So I personally got through this problem. It was about 5 years ago at Marks and Spencer Sheffield store. They only have heat recovery system but no source of heat, and I burst laughing. There was hundreds, £1,000 probably spent, and I couldn't believe like such big market and proud to have this kind of weird stuff with heat recovery system and no heat. And believe me or not, the heat recovery was hitting the water as well, which was going down the drain. It's a little bit complicated. So what you'll see in this picture, it is very easy. The refrigeration equipment, you will take the energy from the store, and instead to dump it outside via the condenser, we'll circulate the refrigerant through the plate heat exchanger, and then normally the water which circulates through that plate heat exchanger will take that energy and bring it back into the store via the heat exchanger. Unfortunately, if you look to the pipes now, they all gray, which means the refrigeration equipment doesn't have any duty because the store it is very cold. So technically there's nothing to heat up into that store. I don't have a source of heat. And even if it looks simple now, I had to drive 100 miles and to have a lot of meetings, and I had tried to explain to some people how this works, and it was quite a tough time. So yeah. Now I think you already got a glimpse of what a heat recovery it is and what it is not. So as I stipulated before, if you want to recover some heat from a store, the store have to have a heating system. Now you see this is a refrigeration equipment, just a basic refrigeration equipment. So what we do with this refrigeration equipment? Can't you see the compressor head? It's red hot because that's the section where the superheated hot refrigerant goes towards the condenser. Now the condenser will eliminate that heat. So we thought if we'll put a plate heat exchanger in between the condenser and the compressor, we can use that heat to heat some water that can circulate through a heat exchanger to bring the energy back into the store. But one engineer which made a mistake tried to convince me that the compressor generates enough heat, so I don't need another source of heat into the store. Look into this compressor, you'll see that piston is moving, and what the engineer thought in his head, or the designer, he thought that the compressor will generate the extra heat required to heat the store if the refrigeration equipment wouldn't have a lot of demand. And guys, we all know we try to build efficient compressors not to have mechanical heat, because this is acting against us. These compressors are not designed to create heat for a heat recovery system. Otherwise, the efficiency wouldn't make sense. So that was pretty painful meeting, and my God, I just remember even today when I was surrounded by about 6 managers trying to explain that heat recovery system, it is not a heating system, and even if this piston move very fast to the compressor, it cannot act like a boiler to heat the store, and it was a mess. But I hope you understood my point now watching this little video. Now let's go further and see what happened here. If you remember, I told you that the hot gas which leaves the compressor normally goes into the condenser, and the condenser will eliminate the heat outside. And you see on the condenser we have fans. Normally they electronically control fans or variable speed drivers control fans, which will run faster or slower according to the heat that need to be removed from the refrigerant. What we did, we used this plate heat exchanger, and we diverted this hot gas which passes by through this plate heat exchanger. Also, the water passes by through this plate heat exchanger, which takes the energy of the refrigerant. Actually, the plate heat exchanger acts like a condenser, but the benefit of this is that the hot water, which changes the energy with the refrigerant, the water will heat up. It will be circulated through a heat exchanger inside the store, which serves a downflow heater, and will recover that energy. And this is a fantastic kind of discovery, or whoever thought about this is a hero, because we can save a lot of energy. However, we don't have to take more than the refrigeration equipment gives us. Otherwise, we can lower the refrigerant pressure too much, and we can have some nasty surprises. That's why you use a lot of three-way valves, and I explained to you how these three-way valves works and why are they there. If the pressure onto the refrigeration system will increase, then the three-way valve of the refrigerant will divert part of the refrigerant through the condenser, so we can control the pressure. So now we have the discharge, the hot gas, going through the plate heat exchanger, but also part of it goes to the condenser. This is the way we can control the pressure onto the refrigeration system. If the pressure still grown into the system, then obviously the condenser fans start moving, and they will ramp up or down accordingly to the quantity of air they have to move to the condenser to keep the refrigerant pressure under control. So can't you see here, this at the moment the condenser and the plate heat exchangers is sharing the refrigerant. So we use the plate heat exchanger to cool the refrigerant, but in the same time I'm using the condenser to cool the refrigerant, because we need to control the temperature. So I still get the benefits of heating the water, but also I have to make sure that the refrigerant will be kept within specific parameters, otherwise the HP can trip the system. If there will not be any heat demand into the store, then we'll divert the refrigerant through the condenser, and the condenser will take over. The condenser will control the refrigerant pressure, so we won't have any refrigerant passing by through the plate heat exchanger. If we will have a leak into the system, as you'll observe here, even if the valve directs the refrigerant to the condenser, there will be a tiny leak, and the refrigerant passes by through the plate heat exchanger. Then we have a three-way valve which will divert the water, and the water will not go through this plate heat exchanger. But this leak is not very likely, because as you'll see on a refrigerant line, we have two three-way valves. So if one is broken, the other one will still hold the refrigerant. but just in case, I just want to let you know that we can divert the water flow. If we'll come across a very cold winter and the refrigeration equipment will not have too much demand, we'll have a kind of cold store, but we still want to keep it above the freezing point. Now, the boiler, which is in line with the plate heat exchanger, will take the duty more and more. And as you will see, the three-way valve will allow a small quantity of warm water, hot water, to go to the plate heat exchanger, so the water will not ice up inside the plate heat exchanger, because if it will ice up, you will break the inside gaskets and the refrigerant will mix with water. So I came across a situation where I have a leak inside the plate heat exchanger, and then the refrigerant pushed against the water. Can you imagine? The refrigerant get about 10 bars or 7 bars, depend how warm or cold it is outside, but the water have only 2.5 bars. So the refrigerant will push into the water, and that's bad. That's why the main quantity of heat will be recirculated. You see the three-way valve will push more, and it will bypass the plate heat exchanger. However, quantity of water will pass by the plate heat exchanger. You can even see the color, so it's going red into the plate heat exchanger and is coming a little bit a different color, like an orange, which shows it is not as hot. We just keep the plate heat exchanger warm, and you can use some electrical heat exchange, like electrical heaters, for this plate heat exchangers if the temperature drop below zero. But in this case, you can see the three-way valve allow a quantity of hot water to pass by through the plate heat exchanger to keep it above the freezing point, and the rest of the water is just diverted back into the heat exchangers inside the store. So this is one of the cases when the refrigeration equipment doesn't have too much duty, because the store it is very cold and the product doesn't need to be cool. And believe me or not, yes, it is not a balanced design. I came across this situation, and with many occasions the refrigeration equipment doesn't work too hard, so obviously there will be nothing to recover, and the boilers take over to keep the store like not very warm, but in a human condition. If the system is not well designed and there will not be enough heat exchanging between the water and the plate heat exchanger, then as you'll see here, the refrigerant will still leave the plate heat exchanger very hot, and part of it have to be redirected into the condenser to control the refrigerant pressure. In that case, the ratio of the temperature won't be very good, and the boiler will have to compensate to send a kind of warmish water into this plate heat exchanger to be, and the plate heat exchanger will boost the temperature. So the plate heat exchanger will have a very small ratio for the water temperature, like you can play with only 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 degrees ratio. Best will be to push water like 20 degrees or 18 degrees and to take it out with a temperature of 45 degrees. But if you have incorrect plate heat exchanger or unbalanced system, you might have a ratio of 10 degrees. So you push 10 and the water goes, as an example, 20. So that's why the boiler should push into this plate heat exchanger 30, and the plate heat exchanger will boost it to 45. So if you're not balancing the system very well, you will see this type of phenomena. Okay. If the system will be short of refrigerant and also the plate heat exchanger will not be very good design, then the boiler will try to compensate, and you will push heat into this plate heat exchanger, and also the bypass will be active as well. And can't you see both pipes are red, because the plate heat exchanger will barely have the capability to boost the water temperature, so the boiler will do most of the jobs. And because the system is short of refrigerant, even the fans and the condenser will not work to drop the pressure, because there will not be any pressure to drop. So guys, I just want you to understand, this job is more for a refrigeration engineer to take care of this plate heat exchanger. And also the refrigeration engineer have to be trained by a control engineer, and the guy which wrote the control philosophy should advise the software engineer very clearly in what you want to achieve. So this is not just a job where you go to manipulate the valves, because if you will do something wrong, you can destroy the refrigeration system. Remember, we just recover the heat from the refrigeration system. We're not creating heat with the refrigeration system. If you have this type of human-machine interface and the program will be nicely written, you will be capable to see every single malfunction on the screen, and it will be easy for you to do some analysis to see what's wrong with the system. If you use a heat recovery system without a boiler incorporated, then you have a different source of heat into your store. Before you check the heat recovery system, please just check your heating system, because if there will not be a heating system in a store, there might not be nothing to recover. Remember, heat recovering system, this word recovering, you're not creating heat, you just recover the heat that is removed from the store by the fridges. Pretty embarrassing, but very true. I came across this situation. The store didn't have heating, zero heating, and I talked about 6 people, manager over managers and technician, and I just discovered the store doesn't have any heating, and they were relying on a heat recovering system. But what heat can you recover from a store where the temperature is 5 degrees? That stores in Sheffield, M&S Sheffield. I will always remember their faces when I told them that they do not have heating into the store. And probably months later they install some heating. It's really important for you not to trust a system. Just go and do your analysis that require knowledge. Don't rely on bloody MVQ3 diplomas, or it's your brain which is more important. Einstein and other people didn't have this MVQ and all these degrees. You have to use your brain. God give you a brain, so please use it. If you do not have the appropriate training, do not play with the heat recovery system which uses the refrigerant heat to heat up a down flow heater heat exchanger, because anything you do wrong, you can destroy a refrigeration system, or you can stop it. Look, anything you do, you can see here, you have an LP, HP. I mean, there's so many things can go wrong. If the system icing up, if the water onto the plate heat exchanger is very cold, or if you do not have water, you can overheat the system. And if the software have the slightest malfunction, then there could be a lot of trouble. So I just want you to remember, the heat recovering system normally does not belong to a HVAC engineer. We have to take the residual heat created by a refrigeration equipment. We have to get what the refrigeration will give us. We don't have to try to pull more than the refrigeration can give us. I have in Epping, Marks and Spencer, the carbon dioxide blow up about 5 times. Again, I have meeting with 4 managers asking questions, and we debate some. I mean, I waste my time in there. I explain to everybody as much as I could. The refrigeration equipment in the winter, if it doesn't have a duty, it will not give you heat. And if your store doesn't have a heating system in place, there's nothing to recover. But it seems to me after 7 years, people are still calling me in desperation, asking me what's wrong with the heat recovery system because it's not heating the store. Come on guys, wake up. Also, do not allow wishful thinkers to tell you that the mechanical motion of compressor parts will generate enough heat to overcome the lack of heating capacity. I mean, some explanations are beyond logical. So the compressor have to be efficient. That's why we build compressors, to have, like, not to have mechanical heat, to have a perfect lubrication. How can one engineer tell the store's managers and infect them with this idea that a compressor will generate heat and that heat should be recovered to be brought back into the store? It's amazing. I wish that engineer will use in his home instead radiator compressors to heat his home. That was completely wrong. So what do you have to retain from this video? When you go and you do assess a heat recovering system, make sure if it's got carbon dioxide. If you're not a refrigeration engineer, if you don't understand the refrigeration system, do not touch, because any valve will turn off. You can stop the refrigeration process, and if the refrigeration will keep cool the carbon dioxide, if it's subcritical, carbon dioxide will burst and you lose the carbon dioxide. It will go out in the atmosphere. And then many other things can happen. If you freeze up the heat exchanger plate, then the refrigerant might mix up with water. So you'll push refrigerant into the water, and you'll hear inside the store where the pressure release valve bubbling, and you'll feel refrigeration smell. I go through all this so you don't have to. Okay. Thank you watching my video. I was not very how can I say very good talker in this one, but I did the best I could, and I hope you will be safe and you will not get any trouble. Just remember, the heat recovery system belongs to a refrigeration engineer, and you only have to take care of the down flow heater. I suggest you will not touch the plate heat exchanger. That should be controlled by the software, and if there's any problem with the valve, a refrigeration engineer should go to take care of it. It is not you as a HVAC, unless you have a proper training and understand how things are working. I saw too many problems, too many innocent technicians scared, too many unbalanced system, too many designers which run away, and too many cover stories. Since I work in UK, I already have the headache here. So any problem you have, just think if it's you the one that's supposed to touch something which is related to carbon dioxide or refrigerant 404A or whatever you do. Keep safe, and yeah, don't be scared to ask questions or to protect yourself.